You're listening to a Rev FM production podcast. Welcome to Pastors Live, the show that discusses things of the Bible and current events for people who love to laugh. And now, the hosts who answer questions with more questions. It's Pastors Dave, Ty, Shane, and the other guy.
Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, it's November 5th, and you are listening to Revelation Radio. If you have a comment or a question, Pastors Live at therev.fm. I just realized we went through like 4 days without saying, send us a note. So Pastors Live at therev.fm, Pastors Live at therev.fm. We'd love to hear from you. Comments, questions, concerns, fears, whatever.
Encouragement.
Encouragement.
We could use that.
We could use some encouragement. Yeah, we could use encouragement. But I've really appreciated our conversations in the Word the last several days, and am blessed to be here with you guys. We have some wonderful people in the studio today. Ben is our man under glass today. He is our engineer and our producer this week. Gary Austin is probably skiing because it snowed at Target, right?
It snowed everywhere.
It snowed. Yeah. So he's
that.
so
It snowed on Hawaii. Did you guys see that?
Did it snow in Hawaii?
Yeah, on the Big Island.
Ooh.
Up at higher elevations, they got several inches.
Yeah.
Wow.
It does snow there on that high.
So it's like you
crazy.
go up and you ski, and then you get out and you surf on the same
Exactly.
day.
The same day.
Same day.
Same day.
Hey, by the way, if you grew up in California,
Yeah.
you go Big Bear.
Go to Big Bear.
And then you go surf.
Go down to the beach and have
surf.
a bonfire.
Same
Yeah,
day.
I always
used
wanted
to
to
do
go to
that.
Big Bear.
So Ben, how are you today?
I'm all right.
You're
Ben, it's National Redhead Day. God bless you, buddy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. And you have a lot of it. You're looking good, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah, I miss mine.
Yeah,
I'm
the hair
praying
retention supplements are helping me
yeah,
out.
I'm praying that you miss the genetic issue here. So
No, definitely not.
So, generation, huh?
Yeah, skip a generation, man. And we also have some other wonderful guys. We got Pastor Shane here today.
Hello, I love you, my beautiful redhead wife. National Redhead Day.
There you go.
I have no redheads.
And then, of course, we also have Pastor Dave here
God
today.
bless you guys, and God bless you, Sylvia, my beautiful redheaded wife.
There you go. And by the way, and we've got Pastor Steve here today.
I'm here. No redheads, though. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay,
that's
Princess.
all right. That's all right. Yeah, that's it.
And you are Pastor Ty,
I am Pastor Ty, Redbeard.
who used to have a beautiful head of
You're
red hair.
redhead.
Yeah, but it's also starting to turn into Whitebeard. So
Yeah, I see
I'm gonna
that, yeah.
it's going to go Pastor
Pretty
Redbeard to
soon.
Pastor Whitebeard.
Pretty soon the kids at church are going to say, "Go up, thou bald head. Go up, thou bald head."
I promise not to call out any wild animals. So I
was going to
promise.
say,
not to
we do
that.
have bears in this area.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But today, hey guys, listen, today is National Redhead Day. It is also Election Day
Yes.
In the United States. Because if you're listening outside of the United States, and I know some of you are, we'd love to hear from you, Pastors Live at therev.fm. But as it being a day of election, we want to encourage people to get out and to vote.
Now,
And
per
to
our
participate.
conversation yesterday, it is not required of you that you vote.
No.
But it is highly recommended.
Highly recommended.
And why would we recommend to Christians who, millions of Christians have kind of said, hey, we're not going to participate. We don't like anybody who's running, so therefore we're just not going to participate. Why would it behoove the Christian to actually say, no, I'm going to go out and I'm going to participate? Why would we want to encourage that?
I think one, Esther, we talked a little bit about that. Esther's just a great picture of what's going on. Hey, we were made for such a time as this, where we are right now, right? And so we need to be good stewards of the time that we have been given in the nation that we've been born in and given to. And we're not saying, hey, you got to be best friends and, make your whole life surrounding who you vote for, right? That's not the point.
Yeah.
We advocate our lives surrounded about Jesus, right? But
Yeah.
we're in America. And so to me, the principle of the matter is being a good steward, and you need to pray about who you're going to vote for. You need to read the scriptures and see who aligns closest to that. I know Pastor Ty's been
Closest, not
right.
You're not going to get somebody
right.
Yeah, no,
Pastor Ty has been mentioning who's going to slow the decay and corruption, right? Because it's inevitable that we live in a fallen world, right? But I would also say too, the principle of the matter is if you just give up and tap out, I mean, that's not what we're called to do as Christians, and surely that's not going to benefit anyone at all. And so, don't grow cynical. Don't grow cold. Just as we need to be on the lookout in our faith, we do need to participate and be salt and light to the world.
Yeah, and I guess the question too, if you're in that place where you're like, hey, I'm not going to vote, let me ask you this: are you praying for them? Because if you're not voting, because we are told to pray for those that are in authority. We have some biblical things and that are required. It's like, hey, we're supposed to be doing this. Right. Samuel, in 1 Samuel 16:7, it says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, look not on his appearance, nor on his height or his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not," or Dave, that's for you.
Thank you.
"The Lord seeth not as men seeth, but he looketh on the for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart." I think one of the things to realize is that when we're talking about elections and all these different things that are going on, it's like, I like them, I like their personality, I like them, and it's like, well, hold on a second,
this isn't junior high.
That's not, it's not junior high.
This isn't a Valentine's Day
it's
card.
It's not a Valentine's Day card, right? Exactly. And I think the other part of that is to remember, and this is what Shane had brought up, that we are called to be the salt of the earth. And I'm not telling you that you got to go out and vote, but I would say that you can get out there and some people are like, yeah, but if I put my name on them, I'm agreeing with everything. No, you're not, because you're going out and you're saying, I'm going to be salt and I'm going to be light. And so salt slows decay. And so I think it's important that we get out and say, hey, I'm going to be salt. And I'm going to say right now, I think this is a decision that I'm going to make. And by the way, this is across everything else.
Right.
And I have to really prayerfully say, hey, where do I feel this is going to make change? And sometimes I feel bad because we don't have those options where, what, you maybe there's a judge that's up again, and you're like, this person seems to not want to slow decay, but there's no other option. Those things happen. But when you have options to say, hey, what's going to slow the decay of the space that I live in my society? I would say do that, and I know it's and it's probably part of it's inconvenient too to get out and to vote and
stand
to do
in
all
that line.
Stuff. Stand in that line. I went out and I voted early because I had a class that I was going to have to be in all day.
Sylvia and I were going to vote early, and then we saw the one ballot box that got set on fire.
Yeah, there's been some stuff.
Yeah, I just went, man, it just bothers me. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. This is just Dave. Now, guys, this is Dave. I'm not speaking on behalf of all the pastors. I'm certainly not speaking on behalf of Water Springs. I'm a private citizen. Here's my thing. Here's the thing that concerns me, okay? And this is what swayed how I voted this year. When I hear people saying, we are going to control what goes out over the airwaves, we are going to control and restrict what is put out there on social media, that scares me like crazy, and I'll tell you why. Right now, we're trying to control misinformation. Okay. Well, what happens when they decide that Christianity is misinformation? When they say, wait a second, you guys on Christian radio and you guys with Christian podcast, you guys on Pastors Live, you say there's only one way to get to heaven, and if you're not following Jesus, you're not going to heaven. Well, gee, that seems to imply that everybody else is going to hell. No, we're not implying that at all. We're saying it outright, that when you put your faith and your trust in the Lord Jesus Christ, and when you change, as Pastor Ty often says, when you change your allegiance to Christ and not to your own flesh, not to the world, okay? When you do that, you're born again. When you're born again, you're going to heaven. If you're not born again, you're not going to heaven. What happens when whoever they are that decides what is misinformation and what isn't? What happens when they say, that's misinformation, or as they've done in parts of Europe and up in Canada, hey, that's hate language.
And Brazil.
Right? and they say, therefore, we are removing Christian radio to protect the public from hate language. That's what really fires me up. And I say, I've got to get out and I have to vote. My voice has to be heard. That I can't stand for that.
Yeah, and truth, by the way, is one of the parts of salt. That it slows decay in a society.
And salt sometimes stings.
And especially if you get it in a wound that's open. However, there's a reason you put salt in a wound.
Yeah.
It slows decay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It does that.
Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people mourn, right? And now I'm not saying, hey, one's righteous, one's not.
We're not saying that at all. Don't confuse that.
That's not the point.
That's not the
point.
point.
What I am saying is pray and see who is more righteous, right? Because they're politicians. They got faults on both sides.
More or less righteous.
Yeah. Exactly. None of them. I'm not saying anyone is righteous in this election or anything like that. But you need to read the word and you need to be able to discern and look at which candidate, which party is doing things that are more righteous and go with that because you're going to rejoice a little bit more in that state.
And there's none
even
good.
if you don't like the person, you're going to rejoice because things are going to be a little bit better.
Well, and I
not perfect.
You have this conflict in a society that's so divided, and division is how the devil works. And those difficult things, it's Matthew. We're talking about being salt and light, and Dave, I'll do it in the King James for you, just to bless you. Matthew 5:13.
Oh, you want to read it correctly?
So I'm just going to read it in this version.
It's not required, but highly recommended.
Yes, not required. Oh wow, we are not King James only. Just so everybody knows, in any way, shape, or form.
No, I will debate against that all day long.
Yeah, he said, "Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden underfoot by men." The idea of being salt and light is something that I think we miss sometimes as Christians, because we have a tendency to misunderstand holiness. Holiness is not isolation from the world. Holiness is living differently in the world. Let me say that again. Holiness is not being separated from the world. Holiness is living for God in the world, is living for Him and living differently in the world. And that's where a lot of people get confused. And it's like, you are supposed to be in the world. The Jewish people, although they had boundaries and borders, God's people were supposed to be a holy people, a set-apart people that looked differently, acted differently, had different ways they dealt with their health, had different ways they dealt with their leadership and all those different things. And so, and of course, obviously there's a train wreck of failure that follows the history of it.
It was for the purpose of being light to the Gentiles.
Exactly, light to the world. Exactly.
What does Jesus say? He says the Queen of the South is going to raise up and condemn this generation. The men of Nineveh, right? Because they were supposed to go and reach these people.
Yeah, they were supposed to be the light.
A couple of weekends ago, you were teaching that on that in Acts 16, right? That's what Paul was saying there in Acts 16 or 13. Pardon me?
Acts 13,
where Paul says, you know what? You guys were supposed to be the light to the Gentiles. Since you have determined that you're not worthy of the gospel, then Barnabas and I are cutting out, and we're going to take it to the Gentiles. And the Gentiles, which is what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
He told them, you were supposed to do that. Since you've decided not to, we're going to do it. And the Gentiles are like, right on. Everybody will be here next Sabbath. You keep preaching, brother. We'll be back.
Well, and of course, he quotes from the prophet Isaiah.
Right,
Isaiah 49.
Yes, Isaiah 49:6.
Yeah, talk about inclusive.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole point, is that God said, well, God made a way.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And by the way, when you study the law, when you study the commandments, you study that ethic of the law, you realize that God has opened the door for the stranger, for the Gentile, for everyone, But he says, if you want to follow me, of course, the proselytes and things like that. There's some covenant. There's some decisions that you have to make about your life if you want to follow God. You know, and I think that's important for us too.
Back to that verse you read, which I love that verse. Right, we are the salt of the earth.
Oh, you mean just because I read it in King James?
No, it happens to be one of my favorites. I'm a big, I don't know if you guys know this, I'm a big Sermon on the Mount guy. I've got several books on the Sermon on the Mount in my library. I love it. I think Stott is one of my favorites. Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship. The Cost of Discipleship is just his commentary on the Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
And I love the Sermon on the Mount. This verse here, and yes, because Ty, you did read it in the King James, the authorized version. But Jesus says here, right? If the salt loses its savor, some translations say if the salt loses its saltiness.
Right.
Well, here's an interesting thing about sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is one of the strongest, most stable compounds around. We could take a salt shaker, right, fill it with salt, put it here on this table or the counter between the four of us, let it sit here for 50 years. In this controlled environment, there's, it's climate controlled, there's no rain, there's no flooding going on in this room, right? We can come back in 50 years, take the salt out of that container, and it will be salty. It will maintain its saltiness. So, golly, how does salt lose its savor? It's an interesting thing. And John R.W. Stott, and I'm not saying everything he says is, gold, but he is right on in this area. Salt only loses its savor through contamination. When it's contaminated with other stuff, it loses its savor. And what did they do? What did the Romans use salt for? That's how they made their roads. The Romans were famous for their roads, and the first thing they would do is lay down salt. Well, you go to the Dead Sea, you got plenty of salt. You got all the salt you want. How many roads do you want? We've got all kinds of salt, right, at the Dead Sea or the Salt Sea. And so the salt that comes out of there, which is where they got their table salt, they would bring up the salt out of the Salt Sea or the Dead Sea, and they would purify it. What would they do? Run water through it. What's the water? The water of the Word, right? But it was a timely and even a costly process with that salt. Or you could just pull that salt out of the Salt Sea. It's contaminated. It's got all kinds of junk in it. It's not good for anything. You can't even put it in a manure pile because it'll ruin the manure. That's what Jesus says, right? But they would use it to lay down their roads, because when they would put it, because it says it's good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden underfoot of men. That's what he's talking about, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, as Christians, we're salt. Well, how do we lose our savor? Contamination. When we allow other junk to come into our lives, man, that's contamination. Oh, can it be purified? Yep. How do you purify it? You rinse it with the washing of the water of the Word. Isn't that cool?
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say one thing about,
one thing? Good for you. We're so proud.
Going into the election, Christians, go out and vote. You're never going to have the perfect candidate ever, because we're all human and people fail. Yeah. It's just like you work at jobs that are the same way. We work for corporations that don't believe in biblical principles, but yet we still work there. I mean, if you're going to have the same things, then quit your job and stay home.
That.
Right.
And you work for government entities that don't have biblical beliefs. So go out and vote.
Yeah, they don't have the values.
They don't have the Christian values that we have, that we uphold, but we still work because we need to pay for bills.
I worked for years for Coca-Cola, and I don't think that Mr. Kemp or the other people at Coca-Cola were saying, hey, let's have Bible study every night.
Right.
And I hold all of your values just like you.
And
by golly, I expected that paycheck.
Right. My wife works for Kohl's. I worked for Walmart, and trust me, there's no biblical principles or values there.
Right.
Anywhere in the place.
Yeah.
So you didn't look at the employee handbook, and it wasn't laced with scripture.
No.
Right.
There was no commandments. There was no, we're going to uphold
no
God.
Adultery,
every morning we're going to come in and pray and, have a Bible study, and then we're going to go to work. There's none of that.
Of course not. But you still work there, and you still
work there, and you got a paycheck, and you had to pay bills.
Right. So in the same way, you're voting for somebody today, or you're looking at propositions. You might think, man, I wish that was written differently.
Right.
but it's as good as it's going to get. I'm voting yes on that, no on that, yes for that judge. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, I think here's the issue. You don't go into a ballot box blind.
Right.
Like, you need to actually know what you're doing before you get there.
Well, exactly. Yeah, you need to
Lord, just
look it over.
direct my hand as I punch the holes here, Lord. You're going to have hanging chads.
Yeah, we don't have hanging chads here in this particular state.
Yeah.
Ben, do you remember hanging chads?
Oh, I was there.
Do you remember hanging chads?
What?
Okay.
I lived in the county where that happened.
Or Chad Everett.
in West Palm Beach.
So
drawing blanks everywhere. For those of you who know who Chad Everett is,
yes,
Pastors Live at the Rev.fm.
Yes. So there was an election, and it was the Bush
Gore. Oh, I'll never forget it.
And so there was one county that made the difference in that election, and they had to go through and count, and they were it was a push button system. Because it was the way that everything was done was like the old computer cards.
Palm Beach County.
Yeah, Palm Beach
we had
County.
a little pin, and you push the thing.
And you push the thing. Well, what would happen? They weren't sharp. They didn't cut it all the way out, and so they called them the hanging chads. And so they had to go through and visually verify. There's great pictures.
The intent of vote.
The intent of what was pushed. Because
I'll never forget
the Chad was still. It wasn't. The hole wasn't.
There was one little
done.
old lady who brought that up. And then Wexler, the representative, took a hold of that, and he ran with it, and the rest is history.
Well, so guys, no hanging chads today.
No hanging chads.
Yeah. Hey, listen. You're loved. Your family. God bless you. Go out and vote. Remember, Jesus is King. He is coming, and continue to worship Him. We'll see you tomorrow night. God bless you.
You've reached the end of another episode of Pastors Live, a Rev FM production podcast. Thank you for listening. Submit your questions and comments by email to pastorslive@therev.fm. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review from your favorite podcast listening platform. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon so you don't miss the next episode drop.